Well, hello there. Who are you?
This is the Zodiac speaking.
Killing must feel good to God, too. He does it all the time. And are we not created in his image?
We all go a little mad sometimes.
After all, murder is, or should be, an art.
I could kill you now pretty easily. Do some interesting things before anyone showed up.
What are these films you can't wait to look at?
Welcome to the Final Girls podcast and the 26th episode of our series dedicated to on-screen serial killers of horror film and TV history. I'm your podcast host, Anna Bogutskaya, and this is the last film we'll be covering on this series. It's not the last episode, there's 2 more to go, which will land in your feeds as usual. Next week's episode will be a special Almost Rants edition, and after that, a conclusion to the whole serial killer series. To send off the many serial killers that we've covered on the show over the last few months, I'm joined by friend of the pod and the Independent's chief film critic Clarisse Loughrey to discuss The Batman, a superhero film cosplaying as a serial killer movie or a serial killer thriller disguising itself as a superhero flick, depending on how you look at it. In Matt Reeves' 2022 interpretation of The Greatest Detective, he channels David Fincher, imagining Gotham as a morally bankrupt, dark and damp city where every institution is corrupted to the bone. And in this environment rises up a masked vigilante with a self-righteous moral code who is determined to fix Gotham. Oh wait, that's the Riddler. Batman's also around. If you enjoyed this episode or vehemently disagree with it, let me know your takes on the Batman and the Riddler by emailing me on hello@thefinalghost.co.uk, but please be nice. As we know, women who talk about superhero movies on the internet get absolutely normal reactions to their opinions. If you enjoy this episode, this series, or indeed this podcast, do leave us a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. I read them all and I appreciate every single one of them. You can also go to Patreon to support the podcast over there. You can find me online, fairly morally righteous from the shadows, on Twitter and Instagram @AnnaBDemented. And with all that said, please enjoy our take on the Batman.
I'm always here to talk about Batman.
I'm always here to talk about villains who are nearsighted and have to wear their glasses above their little serial killer masks, because frankly, if I were to turn into a serial killer, I will have to do that too.
Do you think he explored the option of contacts, or do these not exist in Gotham?
Well, they definitely exist because Batman has the high-tech contacts.
Oh, that's true.
But I think it's a choice. I think it's an aesthetic choice.
I support that.
Yeah, and also, you know what? As a glasses wearer, I choose not to wear contacts because I like the way that the glasses look on my face. I think the Riddler probably likes the way that the glasses frame his face too. Because also Paul Dano, we're getting off track here, we haven't even started. Paul Dano has a very round face and glasses suit round faces. From glasses and contacts to Batman, to begin, can you tell me what is your relationship with Batman as a pop culture figure?
Be like, well, we've been never seen for years. My oldest foe. I like Batman movies. Mm-hmm. I like the Tim Burton ones.
Me
I'll
too.
Specify. Mm-hmm. Batman Returns. I do not like, and I like the Batman TV show because that was fun. Mm-hmm. I do not like Batman as a character, and he bothers me quite a lot, and I frequently get into arguments with people about how much I dislike Batman as a character, which makes me the ideal guest for today, really.
Listen, I'm not a Batman defender, so tell me what irks you about the Batman? Because what I really want to talk about in this episode is about the Riddler. So you go off on Batman as much as you like.
Well, I find him sanctimonious. I will be honest.
That's fair.
Because it's this sort of tension within him that I don't like. That he goes around saying, "I am the night, I am the dark, I am vengeance." But I will say, I think this movie deals with him better than ones in the past. Mm-hmm. But he's like a vigilante who works outside of the law, and yet all he does is beat people up and then give them to the police. So really he's just doing like unpaid police work. Mm-hmm. But he has this whole ego about it. And I feel like what I find more interesting in a vigilante character is somebody who is like willing to do the fucked up thing. And I think about I really love the TV show Peacemaker, who is a DC character. And he has this like confrontation with a neighbor, this old neighbor, who's like, "Do you have a coterie of supervillains?" And he's like, "No, because they're all dead. I killed them."
You sent me this clip. I'm going to put it in right here because it was phenomenal.
Batman has a coterie of supervillains. Joker, Riddler, Mad Hatter.
So what?
You said you were a superhero like Batman. Do you have a coterie of supervillains?
No, he doesn't.
So maybe you're not a superhero after all.
And I have to say, I think not a lie spoken.
You want to know why I don't have a coterie of supervillains?
Why?
My coterie of supervillains is 6 feet fucking under.
There, you see? Batman doesn't kill people.
Because he's a pussy!
He's a dark creature of the night.
He's a jackass who wrestles with murderers dressed like clowns and throws them in prison so they can break out of prison and then murder more people. Riddle me this. How many people you think Batman's indirectly murdered by being too much of a candy ass not to kill these fools who clearly need to be smoked once and for all, you wrinkly, Shar-Pei-looking dementia-infested fuck!
Jesus. I was just trying to make conversation.
I do kind of agree with him that if Batman's gonna go around saying like, "I'm so dark, I'm so fucked up, I'm outside the law," and then he just continually lets Joker get away with it, I don't really know what his purpose is. How is he helping?
What I find really interesting about Batman is how many times he's been reinterpreted and how everyone keeps coming back to the same elements of Batman, right? From the 1960s TV show with Adam West to the Burton movies to the Chris Nolan movies to now the Batman. And I've got to say, next to the original 2 Tim Burton movies, this one is probably my favorite version of it because I think it fundamentally understands that Batman is less interesting than his villains. So personally, the thing that I always remember about the Batman stories is the villains. You know, everybody talks about the Joker, and I think that has always been the biggest name in his arsenal of super foes. But from the very first Batman movie that I ever watched, the people I remember are Catwoman and the Penguin from Batman Returns, and then the Joker from The Dark Knight, and Two-Face from, and the Riddler even from the Joel Schumacher films. I mean, for Christ's sake, even Poison Ivy in the terrible George Clooney Batman and Robin, which I remember watching over and over again because I didn't fully understand why I really enjoyed the scene with Uma Thurman coming out of the monkey suit at that point. But I could not tell you anything about the Batman or Robin even in those movies because I mostly remember the villains. And similarly, I think the Batman, the film we're going to be discussing here, understands that and makes it all about the villain. That's the interesting character in the film, and it understands that Batman is only interesting through the connection to his villains. I do find it quite dull that all of the films keep going back to the same notion, the same origin story. I mean, they're not going to change that, but just kind of slightly twisting it, going back to the same traumatic, inciting moment. It's been so overplayed and so done. And it's just, after so many replays and takes on it, it just doesn't register for me as much anymore. And also, I think this film really made me consider the ridiculousness that you were just mentioning. The fact that this is an alleged superhero, the quote greatest detective in the world, who is just not that good at what he does. And I think this film makes him very obviously not very good at what he does.
Yes. I think what connects this and the Burton Batman is that they are both just kind of freaks.
Yes. Yes.
Which makes the connection with this sort of their, both sides of the same coin connection with their villains feel more effective than, I would say, the Nolan movies. Say that quietly.
I know. I'm sure we're both going to get some very nice DMs about that, but I agree.
Because I'm very good at suspending disbelief during superhero movies, which is a genre that I do really enjoy. But I am continually brought back to the fact that this is a man in a rubber bat mask.
Yes.
That's like a kink. I'm sorry. I feel like if the Batman movie doesn't acknowledge that this man is a sexual freak in some way, he's not, and Christian Bale was far too stoic about it. It's I prefer Batman when he's a little he's a little freaky.
Oh yeah, like in Michael Keaton,
Yeah, I want
that's why Batman Returns is the sexiest one. Yeah.
That becomes believable then. It's it's because, this is the thing that makes him feel powerful, is to dress up in PVC and
that is okay.
Chase people across rooftops. Yeah. No, I'm not. I say freak in a positive way. I should say that.
I think what's interesting about what you're saying is exactly how the Batman made me feel as well. That the way they portray the lead character is so freakish and hollowed out and completely divorcing him from his alter ego of Bruce Wayne, the whole millionaire playboy who lives in a big mansion by himself and never settles down. I'm very glad that they dispensed with that, because I think it would be too weird a performance even for a very accomplished weirdo performer like Robert Pattinson to pull that off. But also, it just never made sense as an alter ego for me. Cannot you cannot hide your freak that much.
Exactly. And he has a whole cave that he lives in. That does not scream extrovert to me.
He's not
And I feel as well, the obsessiveness. I think what's really good about the Batman here is, it really, I have a lot more sympathy for this version of Batman, because I can see that, this whole identity, the costume and the I am the knight thing is really just a trauma response to his parents' death that he just is clinging on to desperately, and he doesn't know how to process that, which I think is implicit in every Batman story. But, as you said, if you have him being this super confident, cool, party boy, playboy thing, and then also this also the tortured Batman figure, it doesn't psychologically feel as believable as a man who, holds himself up in an underground cave looking at computers all day, not talking to anyone ever, and has emo bangs. you know?
So let's talk about this interpretation, because there's been so many different versions of Batman and his villains and his foundational trauma. Where does, and it might get confusing because the film is called The Batman, where does the Batman, the film, fit in? And what does it add?
For me, I think it's the questioning of the symbol. Which has happened before because it's sort of a part of the Nolan movies, but I think it's again, please don't kill me, people listening. I think it's more effectively done in this, because, you know, he really has to confront the fact that he is a part of the system.
Mm-hmm.
And that when you have this Riddler character, who's one of those fascinating villains we can talk about. I'm going to bring up now. Mm-hmm. Very interesting villains where you're like, oh god, they're really right. And then they do that thing in the climax where they do something out of line. So you can't agree with him too much, you know?
Mm-hmm.
But I guess what's interesting about the Riddler character here is the way that he really exposes the hollowness of who this Batman character is.
Yeah.
And it's sort of like, it sort of adds I feel like it justifies all my issues with Batman in a way while still making the character like an interesting hero to watch. But yeah, showing, well, what are you actually doing for this city? Outside of going out in the rain and beating like
gang members.
Gang members up. And then just leaving there. Going, bye. Done now. I've been scary at you, so you're gonna not do crimes anymore, right? Because right, the whole thing is sort of laughable. It's like, what are you doing?
It really is. And I feel like it's two movies in one, right? And this is why I wanted to cover it in this series, is because on the one hand, it's a serial killer movie and we'll talk about how it fits into that. And at the other hand, it's obviously a Batman movie with its own set of requisites and history and expectations, huge expectations. But I found myself, when I was rewatching the film last night, I was thinking, wow, I'm enjoying this so much more even than the first time round, because it does present Batman / Bruce Wayne as someone who is very oblivious to his place in the world until he finally understands it. You know, he's got this moralistic, quite black and white endeavor to rid Gotham of crime, to protect it, to protect the innocent. Doesn't fully understand what that means. And there's this throwaway line that Catwoman throws at him. She just throws this line at him saying, like, you sound like someone who grew up rich. And you just realize that he has no conception of what it's like to not have all of these things at his disposal, to just be sleeping all day and roaming the city all night in your makeshift leather bulletproof suit, and put on makeup and not cut your hair and just not speak to anyone because you don't have to, because everything is taken care of. And it made him sort of not laughable to a degree, but so much more insular and so much more less self-aware than other versions of Batman. And I thought that was the perfect, tonally and psychologically, the perfect kind of vigilante for this film, which is all about, like, well, who is going to do the right thing in a city, in a world where no one is doing the right thing anymore, and there's no goodness left.
Yes, and the idea that his emotional arc over the journey out is to have it sort of exposed that the whole Batman thing is very performative, because he doesn't have to live with any of the consequences. And that's why I do like Catwoman a lot in this movie, because you understand her desperation, because she's kind of next in the firing line. Because she's, this woman in this underground world who has seen her friend maybe girlfriend, just did disappear. You know, knowing how disposably women are treated, she doesn't have the privilege to go, well, I'm going to put on a big show and go, grr, I'm so scary. Don't do crime again. And then run off. Like, she doesn't have that. And I, you know, I do think there are a couple of ways in which the movie does play it safe, in this aspect. I think what this movie really needed was the reveal that his dad was like the big baddie. But they do a whole thing where it's like, oh, he was really desperate because he loved his mom, so that's why he did a bad thing. I feel like that's sort of right. Like, oh, they should have gone the whole way and made his dad Thomas Wayne, the really bad one. But I do really like how this questions, but I guess it's the best of both worlds because it questions the mystique of Batman. But if you like Batman, you still get like a heroic Batman movie because he gets to be like, there's like a Jesus image at the end, so everyone wins.
I think this is a perfect superhero movie or a perfect Batman movie for people who say or think that they dislike superhero movies. Much like you, I really enjoy them. I really love them. Not all of them, not uncritically. And there has been a lot of superhero fatigue over the last couple of years. Has been well covered. But I think this one intersects with two very strong interests of mine. Superhero narratives and serial killer movies and horror movies. So I think it's sort of the perfect middle ground for people who enjoy the latter. But I want to talk a lot about the Riddler because I think this is probably one of my favorite Batman villains that has been reinterpreted by this film. And he's positioned by the movie very much as essentially the other side of the coin to Batman. Both orphans, both vigilantes, both have this obsessive nature, both fashion themselves into creations that are superhuman, that are, you know, not just a man, that incite fright or awe in people in order to be taken seriously by them. What do you think of the Riddler and the way he's characterized and how Paul Dano plays him?
I do. I really like the Riddler, but it's a really interesting villain because I imagine that what he's trying to expose is the exact same thing that Catwoman and ultimately Batman also want to expose, is this circle of corruption, this collaboration between the police force and the criminal underworld. So you're kind of like, I don't know about his methods, but I see I see the motivation. And then you have that point near the end where he's blowing the dams up and you go, well, now I'm hopping off the train.
Yeah.
The Riddler.
You went too far, friend.
But this happens a lot. This is what I find fascinating about comic book movies, is the motivations that they give villains. Because and I think increasingly, more and more in the more recent ones, they always kind of have a good basis of thinking. And I don't know if I should be sort of suspicious about the fact that the Batman presented us with a Riddler who's like, the base motivation is the police force and the government are really corrupted and are, in league with the criminals, and he knows about this money fund, right? The Gotham Renewal Fund.
Yeah.
That is being used for politically corrupted means. And if you think about what the Riddler's actually trying to do, he's trying to expose that. And you go, well, that's a good thing, right? But then the movie makes him do a bunch of morally evil stuff. So at the end, I get scared that we're being manipulated, right? To going, well, maybe the thing he wanted to do at the beginning can't be right then because he blew up the dams. And that wasn't a nice thing to do. This keeps happening. This keeps happening with comic book movies. And I don't know how I feel about it.
I mean, we live in a very morally gray world anyway. Like, black and white heroes and villains don't exist anymore. You know, even Batman is, you know, arguably not really a hero. The Riddler does do bad things, morally questionable things, like bludgeoning people to death from the very first scene. It is before he blows up the dam. But I do genuinely find him quite disturbing. And the way that he's filmed and the way that Dano plays him is... I find him disturbing in the way that I find insults disturbing. And obviously that's a very contemporary and obvious reference that the film makes through the way that the Riddler uses the internet to speak to his followers, his 500 followers, you know, gain some notoriety. It's his conviction and desire for specialness that actually fuels his moral code. I don't think it's actually about corruption. I don't think it's actually about exposing corruption in Gotham. It's about people seeing him as better than the circumstances of his life. When we see the footage of him speaking on the internet, when, you know, the cops go into his apartment and find all his diaries, there's all of this, you know, self-flagellation of, ever since I was born, I've been treated so badly. I've been given the worst of everything, but I know what I must do, what I must become. Like, this is pure serial killer ego talking. This is Francis Dollarhide from The Red Dragon. This is John Doe from Seven. This is like, I am special and nobody can see that I'm special, so I'm gonna make them see. And I think what's the interesting part of this like anti-hero villain with a moral code kind of thing is playing with is that he's saying that he's all about exposing corruption, but really it's about showcasing himself. And I think this like little twist, which I think is like relatively subtle and comes completely from the character and completely from details and from Dano's performance. I think there's a desire to be seen and to be known that, you know, is the opposite of what this Bruce Wayne has. This Bruce Wayne, this Batman is all about hiding, both when he's masked and when he's not. He's in the shadows from the very first moment when we meet him. He's beating up kids on the street. Really, they're fucking teenagers who are messing around with the wrong people, and we just see this blackness, right? There's just these shadows, and his voiceover. He's like, "I am the night. I am vengeance." Like, the main thing that I want is for people to be afraid of the shadows because I might be there, even if I'm not. And even when he takes his mask off, you know, like the emo Batman thing is very funny, but there's all of he's painted his face and his eyes black, his hair is unkempt and just like falling on his face, and outside of looking like Tobey Maguire in Spider-Man 3, there's also this element of like, he's so not a person who wants to be a person. He wants to make himself into a shadow, just disappear completely. I even like the fact that Pattinson kind of didn't bother, and the film doesn't bother with making him into like the buff hench Batman. He's like, no, he is hollowed out. Like, he's pale as fuck because he never sees the sun. He is gone to shit because he probably doesn't eat anything. He's not fit. This is not a fit man, psychologically or phically. And I kind of like that. Like, Batman has all of these means and just wants to disappear. And the Joker and the Riddler has nothing and wants to make himself seen so much. He, like, even the choice of exposing himself, showcasing himself on the internet speaks to that. Like, he's gagging for attention.
It's interesting. The choice I really like in this movie is that, there's that one cop with the mustache, and when Batman comes to visit the crime scene at the beginning, he hates Batman. He's like, "Oh, what's this freak doing here?" Yeah. And then you see him at the funeral when it's Bruce Wayne. And he's like, "Hi, Bruce Wayne," and it was making me think of that, the idea of being inside and out, like within the system, of in what's like the acceptable system, and how it seems like Bruce Wayne wants to be out of the system, but is like delusional to the aspect that he can't do that because of who he is, who his dad was. And then you have the Riddler, who's kind of existing out of the system, but is he has this fascination with Batman, who I think he must view more as being part of the system. And so he wants to kind of co-opt that and have, like, acquire the power and acquire the status. That this fame aspect they were talking about, so that he can be, like, part of the middle, part of the elite, the center. Which is what's really great about this movie, is that, because they talk a lot about how, Batman and his villains share so much. But I feel like this movie really makes the argument for it.
One of the things that, as well, I thought that was very different about this film is actually the murders. There is, I think, in superhero films and shows, except The Boys, which is brutal, there's quite a lot of disasters. There's quite a lot of deaths in the abstract. There's destruction, but there's very rarely murder, like bloody murder. And I found from the very first scene in the Batman that there's a very different tone to hear, where when people get killed, they get killed up close. You see the murder weapon, you see the blood, you see the crime scene afterwards. And I was wondering, what do you think about the film tonally and aesthetically? Does it feel closer to you to a serial killer psychological thriller than a superhero film?
I feel like it switches in between, because there's certain sequences where, the car chase, or the final fight, where you go, well, this is a superhero movie. But then, if you take the rat helmet, like, that's like something David Fincher would come up with, like, as pure serial killer movie, utterly nefarious, but sort of grounded. Darkness aspect to it. I feel like there's tonally it feels separate, but somehow it does fuse together quite well. I don't feel like watching it you go, oh, now he's being Batman again. Oh, he's being a detective. And then I guess you also have the more classic, like, film noir thing to it as well, which is very like how Selina Kyle is played.
Oh, 100%.
What am I saying? She's always film noir. Like, that is Catwoman. But they certainly don't hold back on that. And and I think a lot of the stuff with John Turturro, whatever Colin Farrell was doing, that feels not so much serial killer movie, but like a classic kind of zhuzhed up film noir.
Well, it feels like there's three, at least to me, it feels like there's three key kind of influences in terms of just atmosphere and tone of the whole thing. There's the 1940s sort of film noir, particularly with Selina Kyle. Even the way that Zoe Kravitz plays her with the swagger and the voice and the sugar this and honey that.
Yeah.
Then there's like more, maybe like 1980s, maybe late 70s new Hollywood gangster films, you know, with John Turturro and Colin Farrell just being the basically the De Niro gangsters from the 80s. Like it feels like they're doing Al Capone in The Untouchables, you know, and they're doing Goodfellas, but in a Batman movie. And then the Riddler, and to a certain degree, the Batman, are in a David Fincher film. They're in Seven. They're in Zodiac. It's constantly raining. They're just obsessed about finding each other. They're sending each other little love notes in riddles. And somehow I think that the Batman is the only character in the whole film that sort of jumps from all of these different settings, these different filmic universes, because he doesn't really fit into any of them. So he can sort of navigate between, you know, having a smooch with Selena in the 1940s and in the Maltese Falcon, and then go to the Untouchables and have a face-off with about Spanish grammar with the Penguin, which was my favorite fucking scene ever in this film. And then just pop over to Seven and talk about hell with the Riddler.
I guess because he's the only comic book character in this whole movie. Is if you look at how, you know, Selena Kyle, she has a balaclava, but, you know, she's not. Like, he's the guy in the costume. He is the most supernatural element of this entire movie. And then they very consciously, in the design of the other characters, you know, the Riddler is the Zodiac killer. Mm-hmm. And yeah, Colin Farrell, I guess, has that bit where they've tied him up and he's like wobbling after them. And you go, oh, it's a penguin. But other than that, he is just a guy. He's just a guy in a suit. Mm-hmm. So which I think then works quite well because you constantly have all the other characters in their own genres commenting on the fact of, why is there a guy dressed as a bat here? What is going on? They're sort of confused and scared at the same time.
Or in the case of Selena, kind of aroused because she's like, the bat and the cat? I'm into that.
Yeah, well, that's because she's around him enough that she gets a little look at the lower half of the face and goes, oh, that's a jawline. At first, I would say she's a little like, what?
Oh, at first she thinks that he's going to kill her, because that's the first thing you would think when you see, like, a giant-ass man dressed like a bat in a rubber suit.
Yeah. Who's been watching you through the window.
Yeah, don't. Don't do that. No peeping, Batman.
Yeah, but there's an interesting, correlation behind how little difference there is between the Batman and the Riddler, is that they both love watching people through windows.
Yeah. No, you're right. What do you think about the way that their sort of interactions unfold, from the letters that the Riddler is sending to the Batman to their final confrontation?
I mean, the Riddler's his biggest fan. Well, that's sort of what's good about it, is that the Batman spends his whole movie trying to track this guy down, going, he's such a sociopath, he's so crazy, what is he doing, leaving all these ciphers and riddles and cards, he's such a weirdo. And they finally catch him, and they have that scene, I guess you're talking about the scene in the prison, in the jail, where he's like, baby, it was all about you, like, you are the blueprint for what I'm doing. And that's his real moment of, oh, maybe the fear as a tool methodology has not been working out like I planned, because it has in fact just inspired other people to use fear as a tool themselves, but in ways that I don't like. as Batman. Because they're quite evil. Very evil.
Do you think there's either knowingly or unknowingly, it's sort of a comment or play on this idea of us idolizing the wrong people? And I'm thinking obviously here of like serial killers, right? And the way that whole industrial pop culture complex has transformed into something quite strange, where serial killers, both real and imagined, are being fetishized and idealized and at the worst of times imitated. Do you think that that's how the Riddler is sort of portrayed, as well as someone who needs someone to admire in a way to then copy and try to imitate?
I think yes, but I think also you to go beyond that and to kind of, I don't know, to take a figure like Dirty Harry, right?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And to say the idolization of someone like Dirty Harry, versus a Riddler,
mm-hmm.
It's sort of all about the differences are quite minute because it's all about power.
Mm-hmm.
But then it's like the intent and the target of the intent. And how, like, if you switch, right? Because this is the thing with the Batman is like, what is his intent and who is he targeting with that intent? What is the Riddler's intent? Who is he targeting with that intent? And how kind of slippery those lines are. And you can have Batman with this whole kind of, ideology of like, I am vengeance. I am the Night Fear is a tool. And you take that exact same manifesto, but you give it to someone with different intentions, and suddenly that becomes a moral evil. It's right. I think it's, to me, that's more what it's about.
Mm-hmm.
Is the idea of, I guess it is fair, because I like the line "fear is a tool,"
mm-hmm.
and how that kind of is interrogated throughout the movie. Because that's what the Riddler's doing as well. I think a lot of this, like, blowing up the dam stuff is, like, a performative thing of, like, what's the most, like, comically scary and evil thing I can do right now? But he learned that from Batman, right?
Did he?
So I think so. That, to me, is what the movie is.
Mm.
Is that when he confronts Batman in the jail cell and he says, "You're right, it's thank you." He kind of thanks him for, like, thank you for your part in this.
Mm.
Like, you are a part of this because you taught me that vengeance and fear are righteous. But then you take the word righteous and you go, well, that means different things to different people. And the Riddler thinks he's being righteous, but, like, we as the viewer are going, no, you're being an awful serial killer and being evil. And it's, like, about how easily, like, that sentiment can be corrupted.
I think this is also where Gotham comes in. Because there's, what does righteous mean in a world? What does righteousness mean in a world where everything is corrupt?
Yes.
And I think, in the original Batmans, the Tim Burton ones, etc., Gotham is this very cardboard gothic city, right? But gothic does not necessarily mean corrupt. What do you make of the way that the Batman kind of portrays Gotham?
Beautiful Glasgow.
Listen, having very recently been in Glasgow, beautiful, amazing city. When it was pissing down with rain the entire time I was there, I felt very like Batman.
It's a bit Gotham-y. Yes. There's this idea that, so you have this mayoral candidate who is, I'm presented as sort of like, someone who genuinely wants to end corruption and has been untouched by this entire system of just everyone's working for each other. And And there is, it's quite dark because there is a bit of a sense of like futile nature to it of well, what happens at the end of the movie? Because she has this speech of like, we can rebuild and we can rebuild trust. But then at the same time, Batman says, well, the criminal underground is like up and running again. They can't be stopped. And so you have this very you have this very fragile state at the end of the movie where it sort of feels like Batman saved the day because he's given Bella Real this chance to reform and to end the corruption. And yet it's a very like open question mark sentiment of like, well, really nothing got better yet though, because the entire city is flooded now. And yeah, we took down the Riddler, we took down Falcone, but as Batman says, like other people, and I think Catwoman says, other people just rise up to me, and it's like, God, how do you get to the actual root of it all? So there's a sort of a hopelessness to this movie that I think is, pretty realistic, let's be honest, of, you can take down your Riddlers and your Falcones, but how do you get to like the root of it?
Well, this is what I kind of love about this film, and again, it harkens back to Seven. This is a hopeless city. Everything. I don't think we see daylight. I mean, because there are scenes in the day, but it almost feels like they're shot as day for night because they're also kind of dark. There's no sun in Gotham. Everything is dark. Everything is corrupt. It's always raining. It's rotted to the core. Like, this is not it's morally rotted, physically, architecturally, in every single sense. So this might be a terrible scenario to set a superhero movie in, because you're like, well, is this even fixable? Do we just have to go elsewhere because this is unfixable? And I don't think it sort of ends on a note of hope at all, which most of the other films do, because the city doesn't change. It's just like you said, new villains are appearing. You kill one and then another mushrooms up, and sometimes they become stronger because they're neighbors with the Joker, so that's not going to be a good pairing. Yeah. And I think that's one of the elements that I like a lot about the film. Again, very Seven, constantly raining, ends on a downer note, ends on the voiceover of Morgan Freeman going like, oh, people are fundamentally good and this world is worth fighting for. I believe in one of those things. You're like, yeah, I think Batman at the end of this film is really struggling to decide whether he believes in either one of those things.
Yeah, so I think it combines into this, what we've been talking about, looking at the individual characters' morality and going, God, in this, this world is so messed up that the Riddler occasionally does have a point. Like, that's how bad things have gotten, that even the villain is trying to kind of fix things, but in the worst way possible. But it's like, there's everything sort of topsy-turvy, and this idea that, the institutions that we're meant to trust can't be trusted. Like, everyone at the end of the film is just completely untethered in terms of morality. There's no faith anymore.
It's all about compromise, right? I mean, even the Batman, when he's talking to Selina, as only a rich boy would, being like, oh, how much are you willing to do? How much are you willing to compromise yourself for money? Spoken as someone who's never not had money. I think there's this constant question of like, how much are we willing to compromise ourselves to save the city of Gotham? And do we need some villains, like your Falcons, like your Penguins, in order to keep the worst villains away? These are questions that I don't have answers for them, but that's why I like this film, is because it is actually, there is no clear hero or villain. Just because the Riddler is willing to kill and the Batman isn't doesn't mean that the Batman's choices are more righteous just because he doesn't actually wield the weapon. He still gets people killed. But as long as he, for himself as an individual, is in the moral clear, then I don't think he cares that much.
Which is what I find that's what I like about comic book movies, is that you can have these discussions about, well, what does heroism mean? Is it about having for yourself like a moral framework, or is it about the actions and the effect on their world? And I think all the best superhero comic book movies kind of wrestle with that question to some degree. And I don't think you necessarily have to have the answer. And I think that's what's kind of cool about the Batman, is that it does sort of throws a lot of ideas out there and goes, well, God, everything's kind of screwy, isn't it? Discuss.
But we all look very good in leather.
Yeah, everyone's gonna look great while they do it. But then that's the other great thing about comic movies. Everyone looks great while they're doing it. Everything might be really, really bad. You've got a great outfit on, though, don't worry.
And speaking of outfits, thematically a big thing in the film is about masks, the masks that everyone wears, and whether the real them is the person that's underneath the mask or is the person wearing the mask. How do you feel that the characters in the film, the Batman, the Riddler, Catwoman even, wear their masks? How do they use them?
Because Catwoman's interesting because she doesn't have like an identity as Catwoman, right?
Not yet.
At any point during the movie. Because I would say Batman and the Riddler, the masks are, I mean, yes, they are for anonymity, but it's for like the mythology aspect.
Totally.
You create the fear by kind of they dehumanize themselves and they become basically monsters in a broad term. And so, yeah, the masks link into this idea, fear is a tool. But then I feel like Selina is the opposite. Like, she genuinely uses the mask for anonymity and to disappear. And actually, her most superhero-like action, she does not wearing the mask. 'Cause at the end, when she tries to shoot Falcone, she's got a wig on. Well, but then that's because I guess her identity is already secret because Falcone doesn't know that she's his daughter. So I feel like that's significant in that she doesn't need a mask because her truth is already hidden.
Yeah, she's kind of wearing masks constantly in the shape of wigs and the outfits that she has to wear at the club where she works. And her identity is very slippery. But that's by design and also by the way that people look at her, meaning that they look through her. And I found the scene where she's walking through the club and Batman is in her eye through the contact lens, the high-tech contact lens. And he's like essentially looking at how people react to her, which is all, your typical lascivious, gross looks that see through her and just see her body, her face. And I think that is how she hides as well. That is the mask that she wears. This like really confident femme fatale strutting around that she does is the mask that she wears because she knows that people don't take that seriously. They will just let her go through doors, notice her, but superficially, not enough, and not listen to her, not pay attention to the things that she's saying.
And Batman gets his feminist awakening. This is what it's like, dude. Women were always wearing masks. You don't need your rubber little ears.
Batman always overdoing it. Two scenes I found really interesting. The scene of the Riddler being captured, where he's just not wearing any mask at all. And I love Paul Dano so much. I think he's such a phenomenal actor. And he's so good at calibrating the creepy.
Yes.
With like, he's got like a really kind, like soft face. He's the opposite, even physically, of Pattinson, who's like all, you know, dehydrated, cut you into pieces jawline, and like really sharp bangs. While Paul Dano is just like this very soft, round, pale face with the glasses. And he's so fucking creepy when he gets captured. It's pretty much the same approach as, although less loud, as John Doe when he gets captured in Seven. He's there in plain view. He's not resisting. He is laughing in their face. He's living his little latte art in the cup. Love that.
Who did that? That's the only question I have. Was he like the coffee person? Like
barista?
Barista? I don't know why I couldn't remember that. Did he ask the barista to be like, could you put a little like question mark?
I think he made it himself because he's seen like playing around with his cup just before they come in.
Right. So he's trained in latte art.
He is. He's a man of many talents.
Live streaming for his 500 followers.
Thank you for the detonator tips.
My favorite comment on his live stream is, don't forget your cling wrap. Yeah.
I love that though. It's just it's like the perfect thing. He could do that. Just be so intensely creepy while also saying hi to all my new followers. Thank you so much for subscribing. It really means a lot. A heart face.
Goodbye.
But I love that interaction with Batman afterwards where he is unmasked and in jail and he's like fawning over him like, your mask is amazing. I wish you could see me in mine. That is so Francis Dollarhide and Hannibal Lecter, where he's sort of like, oh, you're the only one that sees me. I hate how the press have vilified you. Your work was amazing. I wish you could see mine. It's sort of on the nose in terms of the dialogue, but I think thematically it's everywhere in the film, and it applies to all the characters because everyone, including the background cops that appear in a couple of scenes, including Gordon, everyone else is sort of is wearing several masks and playing at several things.
Yes, and I think the dialogue in that scene works for me because we have got this, like, this is the thing, Batman is maybe not the world's greatest detective because he really has to have it delivered to him on a plate to finally understand.
He really isn't the greatest detective at all. That's what I kind of love about this movie as well.
Yeah, and so for me, that scene is really about what it takes to get through to him as a character. Because I think we as an audience are probably already there most of the way. But to really have this moment of confrontation with the Riddler, to go, do you understand why this man exists? It's your fault.
And before we wrap up, Clarisse, I just wanted to ask you, do you think that The Batman is a superhero movie cosplaying a serial killer film, or do you think it's a serial killer movie disguising itself as a superhero film?
Ooh, I think it's the first one, because I think that's what's kind of cool about the genre, is that superhero film it's a type of character. but you can set it in any world and it can be about any story. So I think, to me, the Batman is, we have taken this, like, one of maybe the most iconic comic book character of all time, everyone knows, and we've just, like, you know, when you're on Google Maps and you take the little guy and you just drop him.
Yeah.
and we bing it into David Fincher's Seven, and we're just gonna see how that works. And how that affects the story, because you could almost have if you just deleted the Batman, you could, that movie would just play out anyways. I guess Gordon would be the main character, but it would just be a David Fincher movie with, I guess, touches of film noir and the Goodfellas angle. But Batman doesn't necessarily need to be there. Someone just dropped him into the movie to you know, see what happened.
That's really interesting, because I sort of feel the same about the serial killer movie, in the sense that you can just drop a serial killer into any other genre and it would work. So it's a serial killer movie that's cosplaying as a superhero movie for me, because the interesting part for me is the Riddler. And the complicated nature of him and the creepy way that he's filmed and played, like, there is distinct creepiness in it. And like so many other serial killer movies, it is also much about the relationship between the killer and the detective and the riddles. You know, we covered Zodiac together, and that film is so much about the mystery and the puzzle solving as much as it is about the murders. And I think that is also at play here. It's about the solving of the mystery as much as it is about solving the crimes. And you can plunk a serial killer into a comedy, into a sitcom, into a rom-com even. You can plunk that figure anywhere, and it's sort of, that figure drags these elements with it. You know, the obsessive detective, the chase, the crime scenes, the fear that can overtake a city. All of that kind of goes hand in hand with them. And here, obviously, it very specifically carries two David Fincher serial killer movies with it. But yeah, it's quite interesting to hear you on the other side.
Yeah. Now I just want to put Paul Dano serial killer into other movies.
Do you think this procedural serial killer-esque tone is something that future versions, you know, sequels to this particular Batman, can this be maintained if you add more serial killers to the roster, to the Riddler?
Well, yes, I guess because there's a scene with Barry Keoghan as the Joker. I don't know. He's sort of not a serial killer, I guess. He's a bit too upfront about it. Like, he's not going to write a letter, right?
No.
He's going to grab a TV camera and be like, haha, I'm the Joker. I don't, because I think
a TikTok person.
Yeah. A TikTok person. Yeah, I think that's my struggle with them, because they are making the Batman too, from my understanding. Is the Joker is almost, if not as iconic a comic book character as Batman, and there's such an established idea of what he should be like, that even the Joker movie we do not speak of.
There will be no mention of this in my podcast. No, thank you.
But like, even that one relied so much on the pre-characterized version of him. So I'm interested and curious and a little like, you know, Riddler question mark about if they are going to carry on the same kind of tone and ideas and thematic ideas and whether they can find a version of the Joker that fits into that. Because everything we've been talking about, God, this like very complex morality, all grey tones, this city, completely hopeless city. But then the Joker's just cartoony, evil, chaos, crazy.
Little chaos goblin.
Yeah, like I guess the thing with him is that, Batman is logic, Joker is the illogical, but we have established a Batman world where Batman's illogical, so I don't know what the Joker does. He could be like, I'm gonna make you crazy, and the Batman's gonna be like, I already am. Oh, okay. Never mind. I'll go back in my prison cell.
Maybe he'll bring some color, some neon into Gotham.
Maybe. The only thing with that is that I thought when I watched it the first time that he was going to be Irish, and I was like, Irish Joker, I'm in. This sounds fun. And then it took me the second watch to go, oh no, he was trying to do an accent. I hear it now.
Oh, maybe I would kind of love a Joker that was trying to take on like immigration and the terrible policies and terrible standards that a lot of countries have against immigrants. That would be fun.
Yeah, I think I would love to have a Joker that has a point.
Yeah.
Not to do the same villain again, but
yeah, we've done
something that's more than I'm a crazy person.
We've done the Chaos Agent Joker.
Yeah.
But then what if Sabrina Carpenter starts playing Harley Quinn? My God. Why not?
Oh, just do the please, please, please video and put Batman in it. I loved that video.
Me too. And that would track with your theory. You could just plunk Batman into any other genre and then all of a sudden it's a Batman movie.
Get Jenna Ortega in there.
I mean, she would fit right in. And then it would be very small villains against a quite tall Batman. Because all of those people are very short.
The League of Short Kings and Queens.
Listen, nothing but respect for the League of Short Kings and Queens.
I would love that.
Well, I think that's a natural end to our conversation about the Batman.
I'm sorry I end every podcast by saying something really weird. Like, all the Batman villains should be short.
That's why I love recording with you, Clarisse. Never apologize. Never apologize for everything that comes out of your brain. Thank you so much for doing this with me. For listeners who might be encountering you for the first time, where can they find more of your work online?
If you look at my Twitter, has everything at Clarisse Lou, or just Clarisse Loughrey. It'll come up as well.
Thank you so much.